I stopped begging the universe for wealth the moment I realized I was never meant to beg at all. I was not created to plead, to chase, or to fear lack. I was born to declare, to stand in truth, to speak with power. And that's exactly what I did. For years I thought if I begged hard enough, fasted long enough, wished deeply enough, the universe would hear my cry, but the more I begged, the more lack I saw. The more I asked, the more silence I received, until I understood I had been speaking the language of fear, not faith. Begging reflects fear, not faith. When we beg the universe, we are unknowingly declaring that we believe we are separate from our supply, that we are lacking, and that something outside of us must be persuaded to help us. Begging is rooted in the belief that the good we desire is far away, difficult to attain, and must be earned through suffering or desperation. It is a silent admission that we do not trust the divine flow of abundance that is already available to us. The language of begging is laced with doubt, insecurity, and lack, and when we operate from lack, we continue to experience it not because we are being punished, but because the universe faithfully mirrors our dominant beliefs and feelings. True wealth begins with spiritual certainty, not emotional pleading. Faith does not beg. Faith declares. Faith knows. Faith speaks the word and then rests in divine assurance. When a person says, "I need money," from a place of fear, they send out the vibration that money is absent, elusive, and scarce. That vibration attracts more experiences that confirm this belief. But when a person says, "All my needs are met now," even in the face of bills or an empty wallet, they are stepping into spiritual alignment. They are declaring truth over appearance, and appearance must eventually conform to truth. There was a time when I believed that the louder I begged, the more likely the universe would take pity on me. I prayed with desperation, spoke with anxiety, and waited in frustration, but nothing changed until I did. I realized that begging was keeping me small, weak, and spiritually disconnected. I began to observe how I was speaking about money, about my life, and about myself. I noticed how often I said things like, "I don't have enough," "I hope something comes through," or "if only I could catch a break." Each of those phrases was a spiritual withdrawal from the bank of abundance. They were affirmations of lack, cloaked in the disguise of honesty or realism. When I replaced begging with bold declarations, my life began to shift. I said, "I am one with infinite substance. Wealth is drawn to me like a magnet. Every dollar I need is already on its way." I said these things not to convince the universe, but to remind myself of the truth. I no longer treated the universe like a reluctant parent who needed to be persuaded. I treated it as the perfect, loving source that responds to the vibration of my word. And the results were undeniable. Opportunities came, doors opened, the flow began. Begging comes from the mind, but power comes from the spirit. When we speak from spiritual authority, we no longer ask if we are worthy, we know we are. We no longer chase, we attract. We no longer shrink in fear, we rise in faith. And that shift, that sacred inner shift, is the beginning of true, lasting wealth. Your word shapes your reality. Every spoken word is a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind, and what you continually declare becomes the harvest of your life. Most people speak carelessly, without understanding that the universe listens not only to what they say, but to the energy behind it. Words are not just sounds, they are containers of belief, emotion, and intention. And what you speak repeatedly, especially with feeling, begins to solidify into form. It may seem invisible at first, but the process is as exact and dependable as planting a seed and watching it grow. If you speak of poverty, you will see more poverty. If you speak of overflow, you will eventually live in overflow. There is nothing neutral about your words. Each one sends out a signal, a vibration, a command. And the universe, ever obedient to spiritual law, responds with unwavering precision. When a person says, "I can't afford this," they are not just describing their current condition, they are reinforcing it, breathing life into it, and making sure it stays. On the other hand, when someone says, "Money flows to me from expected and unexpected sources," even if they don't yet see the physical evidence, they are preparing the way for it. The spoken word builds invisible bridges to visible results. This is why it's so important to guard your tongue and speak only what you desire to experience. Many people unknowingly curse their finances with their own mouth. They say, "Nothing ever works out for me," or "I'm always broke," or "I don't know how I'll make it this month." These are not harmless statements. They are affirmations dressed as complaints. The universe does not filter sarcasm, hopelessness, or jokes. It mirrors what is said with conviction. And when these negative affirmations are spoken daily, they create spiritual agreements with lack. Changing your words is not about pretending or lying to yourself. It is about aligning with truth, the higher truth that abundance is already yours by divine inheritance. When I began to understand the power of the spoken word, I became very deliberate with my language. I stopped speaking about struggling and started speaking about aligning. I refused to say, "I can't," and replaced it with, "It is unfolding perfectly for me." I spoke to my finances as if they could hear me because they could. I blessed my bank account. I thanked the money I had, even if it was small. I declared, "Large sums of money come to me quickly, easily, and continuously under grace in perfect ways." These were not just words. They were spiritual commands backed by belief. Over time, my reality began to mirror my declarations. The more I spoke abundance, the more it became my normal. The shift did not begin in my bank account, it began in my vocabulary. I spoke wealth into existence, not by wishing, but by knowing that the creative power of the universe responds to every word spoken in faith. Wealth is a spiritual birthright, not a reward for struggle or effort. It is not something to be earned through suffering, nor is it reserved for a chosen few. It is a divine inheritance available to all who recognize their connection to the infinite source. The idea that we must constantly prove our worth to receive abundance is a lie rooted in fear and separation. The truth is, we are already worthy. We were born with the right to prosper, just as a rose is born with the right to bloom, but this right must be claimed, not by efforting in the outer world, but by accepting it inwardly, spiritually, and completely. For a long time, I believed wealth was something I had to chase. I thought I needed to convince the world of my value, work endlessly, and always be in motion, just to deserve a small portion of financial relief. I lived with the mindset that if I was just a bit more productive, or more educated, or more impressive, maybe then I would be worthy of financial peace. But this mindset never brought me abundance. It only brought me exhaustion. Because chasing implies that what you desire is running away from you, and spiritual law doesn't operate through chasing. It operates through alignment. The moment I began to see wealth as my divine right, everything shifted. I no longer asked, "Am I doing enough to deserve this?" Instead, I began to declare, "It is already mine. I receive it now." Just like sunlight doesn't need to be earned by the tree, wealth doesn't need to be earned by the soul. The tree grows because it accepts the light, not because it begs for it. I realized that my only job was to remove the blocks within me that resisted my good. I had to stop arguing for my limitations and start agreeing with my divine nature. The world often teaches us that money is hard to come by, that life must be a struggle, and that we are separate from the supply we need. But spiritual truth tells a different story. It tells us that we are already one with infinite substance. that the same energy that grows forests, paints sunsets, and spins planets is also responsible for our financial flow. When I stopped identifying as someone who lacked and started identifying as someone already connected to the source of all things, my outer life began to reflect it. Wealth isn't something to be earned, it's something to be claimed. And the way we claim it is not through force, but through faith. When you truly believe that abundance is your birthright, you begin to speak differently, act differently, and expect differently. You stop shrinking to fit old patterns and start expanding into divine truth. And it is this expansion that allows your good to find you, not as a distant dream, but as a rightful, natural part of your existence. Change begins in consciousness first. Nothing truly shifts in the outer world until it is first transformed within. The mind is the mold, and life simply pours itself into the shape we consistently hold in our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. Many people spend their entire lives trying to rearrange circumstances, solve problems, or improve their conditions, never realizing that what they are experiencing is just the echo of an inner state. They keep fixing symptoms without addressing the cause, but the cause is always consciousness. When I was living in financial limitation, I thought the problem was outside of me. I believed if I just had a better job, more clients, or a bigger opportunity, things would finally improve. I was convinced that success depended on something changing out there, but nothing truly improved because I hadn't changed the way I thought, the way I spoke, or the way I felt about money. I still saw myself as struggling. I still felt anxious about bills. I still carried an identity of someone who never had enough. And as long as that inner belief lived in me, my outer world mirrored it faithfully. It wasn't until I shifted how I saw myself that anything outside of me began to respond. Everything begins in thought, and not just fleeting thoughts, but dominant, repeated, emotionally charged thoughts. These are the blueprints we hand over to the universe. If I constantly think, money is hard to come by, or I never catch a break, then life must prove those thoughts right. Not because the universe is cruel, but because it is just. It reflects what we deeply believe, not what we casually wish for. That is why transformation must begin with awareness. I had to become conscious of my own patterns, my inner dialogue, my expectations, my assumptions. I had to take responsibility for the part of me that kept rehearsing failure while hoping for success. When I began to see wealth not as something I had to reach for, but as a state I had to embody, everything changed. I started affirming abundance, not just with my words, but with my feelings and imagination. I closed my eyes and pictured myself living in peace, in flow, in gratitude. I imagined myself being supported, celebrated, and financially secure. I stopped focusing on what I didn't have and started feeling what it would be like if I already had it. And those feelings became a magnet. That new identity became a silent prayer that life began to answer. The outer world eventually caught up with the inner change. Unexpected opportunities came, delays turned into breakthroughs, the very people I needed to connect with appeared. It was not magic, but law. It was not luck, but alignment, as within, so without. The universe could only give me what I had made room for in my consciousness, and when I made space for wealth, truly, deeply, without contradiction, there was nothing left to resist it. My inner shift became my outer story. Speak as if it's already done. This is not about pretending or ignoring reality. It is about aligning with a higher truth that supersedes what your physical eyes can see. The unseen always precedes the seen. The spiritual realm responds not to desperation or waiting, but to conviction and embodiment. When you speak as if the good you desire is already yours, you are not lying. You are activating a spiritual law that brings it forth. The universe hears the energy behind your words, and when that energy is rooted in certainty rather than lack, doors begin to open that no one can shut. For most of my life, I used my words to describe what was in front of me. I said things like I'm broke, I'm trying my best, or I hope things turn around, but none of those statements moved the needle. They only reinforced the reality I didn't want. The day I began to speak as if it was already done, everything started to change. I stopped saying, I need money, and I started saying, I always have more than enough. I stopped saying, I'm waiting for an opportunity, and I began declaring, my perfect opportunity is here now, and I recognize it with ease. I stopped living in the future and brought my words into the present. There is divine power in the present tense. When you say, I will be successful, you are placing your success somewhere off in the distance. But when you say, I am successful, you claim the vibration of it now. You enter into agreement with the experience, and that agreement becomes a spiritual contract. The universe does not operate on maybe, someday, or later. It responds to clarity, to intention, and to unwavering belief. Your word is the mold. The substance of life fills it accordingly. This shift in speech is not a technique, it's a way of being. When you speak as if it's already done, you walk differently, think differently, and choose differently. You no longer ask, how will it happen? Because you know it's already in motion. You act from trust rather than fear, from vision rather than doubt. You are no longer chasing the thing you want. You're magnetizing it by becoming the person who already has it. And that change in identity, expressed through your words, has magnetic power. I practiced this even when my outer world said otherwise. I declared abundance when I had little. I spoke of expansion when I felt confined. I gave thanks for the answered prayer before it showed up, not because I was delusional, but because I understood that faith requires imagination, and imagination is the bridge between the spiritual and the material. Every time I said, it is already done, I moved closer to the reality I desired. I aligned my words with the vibration of completion, not the vibration of waiting, and over time, the world caught up to my declaration. Because what is spoken with belief begins to gather substance until it appears effortlessly in the scene. The power is in the present declaration, not in the distant hope, not in the endless planning, and not in waiting for the perfect condition to speak. It lies in the moment you open your mouth and declare what is spiritually true, regardless of the facts that surround you. Life does not respond to hesitation. It responds to the words spoken with authority. Every declaration made in the now is a command sent out into the unseen, initiating a process that draws results to you. Most people delay their good by postponing their declaration. They wait until the bank account grows, until the opportunity comes, until they feel more confident. But spiritual law doesn't require evidence to begin, it requires faith that acts as if the evidence already exists. I discovered that my turning point came not when things got better, but when I stopped waiting for them to get better and started speaking as if they already had. I no longer said, one day I will be wealthy. I said, wealth is mine now. It flows to me in divine timing and perfect form. I didn't wait to feel secure to speak security. I spoke it while I still felt unsure. That was the test, and that was also the key. When you declare something in the present, in the face of contradiction, you prove that you are aligned with a higher truth. That truth, not the appearance, becomes the new blueprint for your reality. There is power in immediacy. The moment you say, I am, you ignite a force, you are claiming an identity, and the universe immediately begins to shape conditions around that identity. When you say, I am rich, you are not just describing a goal, you are anchoring a vibration that must find form. It doesn't matter what your current experience says. What matters is what you believe and declare now. Your declaration becomes law. It becomes a container for manifestation. But if you delay your word, If you keep placing your good in the future, you push it further away. Someday is not a creative force. Now is. Even in moments of fear, I learned to declare boldly. I stopped waiting for confidence to arrive and used my voice to call it forth. I said, I walk in power, even when I felt weak. I said, I am favored, even when I felt forgotten. I said, I am guided, even when I had no idea what to do, and something sacred would happen. My inner world would begin to rise to meet the truth I had just spoken. My emotions, thoughts, and posture would shift. My circumstances didn't have to change instantly, because I had already changed, and once I changed, the outer would always catch up. The present moment is the point of creation. It is the only place where real power exists. Every declaration made in the now sets something in motion. When you speak from the present with faith and conviction, you are not begging for a future blessing, you are activating it now. And that now is where miracles begin.